Hi there. In this video, we're going to go over how to heal with toxic shame, connecting to your authentic self. My name is Christopher, and my coaching business is Humble Fox Consultations. And with that, let's dive right into it. So I wanted to start off with a little quotation here by John Bradshaw. And he says, "We cannot heal what we cannot feel. So without recovery, our toxic shame gets carried for generations." That is from his book, Healing the Shame That Binds You, which is actually where I got some, or most of this information was in his book, Healing the Shame That Binds You. And I also got some information from Alice Miller's The Drama of the Gifted Child, The Search for the True Self, which I really recommend both these books. I think these are staples in any therapeutic space. I've linked these books down below in the description, so if you want to check those out, absolutely, I highly recommend it. So right off the bat, what is shame? So Bradshaw talks about this idea that there are essentially two different forms of shame. There's healthy shame and toxic shame. And I want to get that very clear, is that shame serves a purpose within the body. Shame is a limiting factor in several cases. And what shame does is it actually shows us where our limits are. Now, where this gets unhealthy is that when we start limiting aspects of ourselves that don't need to be limited. But there is a healthy sense of limitation that we carry with us. You know, we as a human and a soul living in a human body experience the paradox of having this part of us that may be limitless and at the same time experiencing the limitations of being inside of a human body. And so healthy shame is the part of us that knows ourselves. Nietzsche talks about healthy shame being the source of spirituality, the sense of humility, the sense of that we actually have to get humiliated back to the ground of our being and know that once we're humiliated and we find that sense of humility, then we can be with who we actually are and not feel that we need to be more than or less than. Healthy shame lets us know that we are human. This means that there's something greater than us. It brings us to the realization that we are in fact not God, that we are indeed limited, and that we do need help. On the other hand, toxic shame is a deep-seated, pervasive feeling of being fundamentally flawed, unworthy, and unlovable as a person. And I underline that unlovable as a person because that is the ultimate condition of shame, is that at some place we feel that we are unworthy of our own love, that we're unworthy of God's love, that we're unworthy of love in general. And I use the word God not in a religious sense, but in the sense of source of love, of infinite intelligence, of the Jungian archetype of the self, that there's something that is willing to love us, if it not even is ourselves. And so this shame is not just about feeling guilty for specific actions, but rather it is a core belief about one's inherent value and worthiness. So toxic shame is the belief that I am unworthy, that I am worthless, that I'm not good. All of those elements are shamed, and what happens is we get shamed to our core. Our authentic core becomes shamed, and we develop our personalities, our entire reality on top of this fact that we're unworthy of love. So what are a couple of different signs of shame? So one of the main signs of shame, one of the main symptoms of it, and the way that you can self-diagnose or at least determine whether or not you have some shame inside of you, which, spoiler alert, is all of us because it's part of the human condition, is that we have this oscillation between grandiosity and worthlessness. We have this oscillation of being more than human and less than human, and never actually being human. There's a shame in being human, and with that shame also comes perfectionism, right? That's another common sign of shame, is having this need to be better than, never being able to make mistakes. When recognizing that being human means making mistakes. Being human means going through that process of learning through making mistakes. It's a part of life. And so perfectionism is it's a protection mechanism trying to keep us from feeling shame. Another common sign of shame is addiction. And this isn't just addiction in the sense of substance use. This is any addiction we have. Addiction to validation seeking on social media, addiction to process addictions like food, gambling, sex. It could be addiction to video games. It could be addiction to pornography. Any form of addiction is a sign of shame. All addictions are rooted in shame. Comparison of others, always looking to the outside world to see how we're doing on the inside, always needing validation and reassurance about who we are from the external world. Now, there's a healthy amount of that. There's a healthy amount of reassurance that we can accept from the outside world, but when it becomes pathologized and addictive, and when we go to the point of sacrificing who we are to receive that validation, is when we start get borderlining that unhealthy form of validation seeking. Inability to meet basic human needs, not going to the dentist, not getting regular doctor checkups, not taking care of ourselves in a healthy way, not eating foods, not exercising, not taking care of these basic human needs, drinking water. Also, inability to ask others for help. If it's difficult for you to ask other people for help, there's a good sign that there's some shame tucked away in there, a strong inner critic that's really linked to that idea of perfectionism, this part of ourselves that's constantly watching and berating us whenever we make a mistake or do something wrong. Negative self-talk, just like constantly running through our heads, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'll never be like them, whatever it may be, that negative self-talk that's perpetuating and running in our mind constantly. And then just low self-esteem, not believing in ourselves, not having confidence, and there's so many more. Ultimately, I want to get back to the root of this, which is that all of these messages are saying that the core of who we are is not enough. I am not enough as I am. Ultimately, I am unworthy of love. And so in Alice Miller's book, she writes about the addiction aspect, which is that we find a similar example in the behavior of addicts. People as children successfully repress their intense feelings, often try to regain, at least for a short time, their lost intensity of experience with the help of drugs or alcohol. And it's not just substance use. This is with sex, with gambling, with working all the time. We can get addicted to anything and everything, and we do it in a way to try and compensate for those inexpressed or unfeelable feelings that we were unable to feel as children. So this idea of being more or less than human, I want to touch on this again, because that's really what the toxic shame is about, is trying to be more than who we are or less than who we are, because who we actually are isn't enough. So Alice Miller writes, behind manifest grandiosity, there constantly lurks depression. And behind a depressive mood, there often hides an unconscious or conscious but split off sense of tragic history. I think that that's what this image is trying to show here, that we put on this mask, but inside this is how we may be feeling. In fact, grandiosity is the defense against depression, and depression is the defense against the deep pain over the loss of the self that results from denial. So just breaking that down real quick, grandiosity is the defense against depression, so not feeling those feelings. Grandiosity is like this mask that we put on, that we're doing better than, that we're more than who we are, that things are going really well, and the depression is the defense against not having to feel those deep feelings of sadness and grief and loss and loneliness and shame inside of us. Bradshaw writes on this as well. The most paradoxical aspects of neurotic shame is that it is the core motivator of the superachieved and the underachieved, the star and the scapegoat, the righteous and the wretched, the powerful and the pathetic. And so we oscillate between those two, feeling that we're more than human, that we're better than other people, and then feeling less than, and we're less than others. And this kind of also comes with these ideas of like constantly idealizing and devaluing other people all the time, constantly comparing ourselves to, are we better than them or less than them? Are they better than us or less than us? That all comes from a sense of inadequacy or an insecurity inside of us that stems from shame. So where does shame originate? Where does it come from? So as children, we came into the world as beings capable of completely expressing ourselves. We laughed when we want to laugh. We screamed when we want to scream. And people couldn't really do much about it. Now, over time, our parents rewarded us for behaviors that they enjoyed and punished us for behaviors that they did not enjoy. So we were either validated, we were either praised or invalidated, meaning shamed for certain behaviors. So we were punished for acting in certain ways, but we recognized that we were rewarded in other ways. So we started learning as children that there were some parts of ourselves that our parents liked about us or our caretakers liked about us, and then some parts of ourselves that weren't allowed. And so we decided to hide those parts that weren't allowed actually into what is known as our shadow, but we hid those parts of ourselves from the external world, but they don't go away. They become disowned. So they become split off from ourself. These parts of who we actually are, we pretend that we're not. They become split off. Now they don't go away. So if they have basic human needs, like a need for acceptance or a need for just love from a parental figure, and we weren't able to get that as a child, we probably hid that away from us, and we still have this need, and it will come out in these subversive and manipulative ways unless we're able to somehow get in contact with that and recognize that that is part of us. And that's a normal part of being human, is having needs. And that's what toxic shame does, is it says that our needs as humans are not valid or worthy, that our wants or desires were not valid. Many times in poor and even in wealthy families, when a child wants something and the family doesn't have the means to produce it for the child due to either financial insecurity or just not necessarily wanting to, give that to the child's wants are then shamed in some way, and the child learns that it's not safe to ask for or to want things. And so we may have confliction about wanting things in our life, of wanting money, of wanting a romantic partner, of wanting different things that are normal, natural human wants to have in life, and we may feel shame towards that. And so we're constantly self-sabotaging or restricting ourselves from what it is that we truly want, which is ultimately love and connection. So continuing this idea, where does shame come from? So shame comes from a variety of different factors, and it's kind of a complex, but it's sort of weaved into family dynamics, meaning just how we related in our family structures. Invalidating environments. This could be from schools or religious upbringings or different environments around us that constantly told us that we weren't good in some capacity. It could be from other children at school who are being shamed from their parents. It could be bullies. And a huge one is traumatic experiences. This is ultimately where shame comes from, is that we experience shame as a result of trauma. And when I say the word trauma, I do not necessarily mean abuse. I mean many different forms of trauma. It's traumatic for a child to grow up too early to meet the needs of a parent before the child's needs are met. So these forms of trauma come as a sense that I'm not worthy, that my needs are not worthy of being met because I need to meet the needs of the parent out of my own survival. It could come from cultural and societal influences, right? A common one is for young women to feel shame about their body, or just women in general to feel shame about their body from seeing magazines of models who maybe starve themselves in order to get the perfect shot, and to have these societal standards of what it means to be a woman or to be a man in today's world. And then also from interpersonal relationships, we may be in close, intimate relationships that people end up shaming us. It could be from our parents' relationships still. It could be romantic partners. It could be close friends in our lives. So that's all worth evaluating and coming back to in our own personal history. I want to get this point across because it breaks my heart every time I hear a client say something along the lines of, I'm not an artist or a singer. Every child is an artist. Every child is a singer. Every child plays. Every child is creative. Every child dances, and every child dreams. And we all have that inside of us. And if there's any part of you that rejects any one of these identities, that part of you is a part of you that is shamed, because every single child has these capacities. Every child is an artist, and they're not creating art for other people. They're just creating it for the sake of creating. A child in itself is a piece of poetry. And so having these qualities about ourselves become shamed ends up creating identities later in life of people saying things like, I mentioned my clients saying things like, I'm not an artist, I'm not really a singer, I'm not very creative, I don't really dance, I don't know how to dance. Well, that ego structure, that part of ourselves that says I don't know how to dance, perhaps could get in touch with that inner child that does know how to dance, because there's a part of us inside that does know how to dance. So part of the healing comes back to reclaiming these aspects of who we really are. So how do we heal from shame? Great question. So this is from Alice Miller. Alice Miller says, the damage done to us during our childhood cannot be undone, since we cannot change anything in our past. We can, however, change ourselves. We can repair ourselves and gain our lost integrity by choosing to look more closely at the knowledge that is stored inside our bodies and bringing this knowledge closer to our awareness. This path, although certainly not easy, is the only route by which we can at least leave behind the cruel, invisible prison of our childhood. We become free by transforming ourselves from unaware victims of the past into responsible individuals in the present, who are aware of our past and thus able to live with it. Most people do exactly the opposite. So part of what she's saying here is we must feel what's happening inside of our bodies, learn the wisdom from these feelings inside of us, recognize that our pains are actually some of our biggest gifts that we get to bring into the world, and then transform this narrative of being a victim into recognizing that one time we were victims, but we no longer are that. We are adults capable of defending ourselves and meeting our basic needs. Healing from shame. So as a child, I was terrified of adults and I did not want to express my anger around them. I have that now, meaning I'm able to express my emotions. I'm able to express who I am now, and I need to recognize that. Tony Robbins tells the story all the time of this little baby elephant who was captured by a circus. And in order to train the elephant not to move anywhere, what they did is they stuck this big giant pole into the ground and they tied the elephant to it. Now, the baby elephant tugged and tugged and tugged and could not break free from the pole. Flash forward 20 years, and now the elephant is 20,000 pounds heavier than it was as a little baby elephant. And that elephant could rip that pole out of the ground, run out of the circus, do whatever it wanted to. But because it learned as a child that it could not break free from that pole, it no longer has that knowing or that desire to break free. And that's what happens to us as children. We keep trying to break free from that pole in our family dynamics, break free from that pole in society, break free from that pole within our classrooms and churches or whatever it may be. And what ends up happening is that we get broken, that some part of us gets broken, our soul gets broken down, and we may feel broken inside because of that. And so our job is to go back and reparent that part of ourselves to recognize that we are now an adult, that we can break free from that pole, and that we have the ability to do so. Alice Miller says, as long as the old feelings were blocked, the most brilliant intellect cannot break this block down. That means that we have to feel it. That means that healing from shame is feeling the shame. We have to feel it to heal it. You have to feel your feelings. You can't intellectualize or think your way out of this one. We must go into the body and feel what's going on. Another way to heal from shame is connecting to our creativity. Creativity in itself is the healing energy, because that's what was shamed. Our creativeness, our sense of sexuality from the inside, our libido, that's what was shamed, was who we really are, which is a creative being capable of expressing themselves. And so through creative acts, not creative acts for the purpose of having an outcome or creative acts for showing people, but creative acts for the sake of creating. And then being seen in safe spaces. So this is within a community or with trauma-informed professionals. Healing from shame, also telling the truth. As a child, we may have learned to lie. I remember as a child, I would tell these small fibs all the time when someone would ask me about if I'd seen a movie and I hadn't seen that movie. I would tell them yes to feel connected to them, to make myself seem better in some way. I would lie all the time about things in order to make other people think that I was better than who I really was, because inside I didn't feel okay with who I was. And so part of healing from shame means telling the truth even when it's difficult. It means being vulnerable in safe spaces, not in spaces that are going to get us re-traumatized, but in spaces that we can connect with others. Healing from shame means taking care of ourselves. It means getting a dentist appointment. It means going to the doctor and having a checkup. It means getting massages. It means meeting our basic needs: nutritional, exercise, sleep, water, sexual, making sure that we are meeting our financial needs. If we're unable to meet our financial needs every month, then there's a sense of shame that's keeping us blocked from doing that. Practice setting boundaries. When we were children, that's what was overtaken, was our sense of ability to set boundaries, our ability to say no to things. And so we have to learn that that pole is in the ground, but we can rip it out and we can say no, and we can take our inner child and champion him, as John Bradshaw would say, and become the parents that we need to be for our inner children. And then practice authenticity, practice being who we really are. One way I like to measure my level of authenticity, which I'm absolutely still working on, is, do I change who I am for different people? Which of course we all do in some capacity. With different people, we alter ourselves in different ways, but how much am I changing myself? When I'm with different people in different groups, am I who I am, or am I constantly shape-shifting and meeting the needs of other people? Who am I, and am I able to hold that sense of presence in the room, as opposed to letting the room constantly move me around and change who I am? And here's some practical steps to heal from shame. So first and foremost is developing a sense of mindfulness. That means meditating or learning ways in which you can start to identify your shame triggers. One of the most amazing and incredible practices I've learned to do this is Vipassana meditation. Vipassana meditation can be learned by going to 10-day retreats, which are completely free to go to. They are donation based, and I highly recommend checking those out. I'll leave a link in the description about the Vipassana meditation retreats. Challenge your negative beliefs when you do see them come up. Every time a thought arises about I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, we're not responsible for our first thought, but we're responsible for our second thought and the action that we take after that. So that thought of I'm unworthy comes up, take a breath, affirmation, I am worthy, and then continue to take action in a way that shows ourselves that we are worthy. Feeling your feelings. To me, that looks like taking time to actually sit down and just check in with my body and to just feel and to listen what's going on inside, and to make time for that, not just doing it as it needs to, because if I'm not constantly doing that and feeling that, then the pressure builds up and it will come out in unhealthy ways, in ways that I don't want it to. Then practicing self-compassion, vulnerability. Also, asking for help. One thing that happens to individuals who have been shamed as children is that we have a difficult time asking for help. So one way you can ask for help is by getting a therapist or a professional who's trained to deal with this. You could join a 12-step group, which is completely free. I understand that therapy may be an expensive modality, but there's community and 12-step groups that are completely free to go to. I really recommend ACA, which is Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families Anonymous. And it's an incredible program to start doing some inner child healing work and to start piecing together what happened in your childhood, and then begin working towards sobriety. If we continue to numb ourselves in whatever way, if it's through substances or process addictions, through food, sex, work, money, whatever, then we'll never ultimately feel what's going on inside. And so we must begin working towards sobriety so we can start feeling what's happening in our bodies and not let our drugs and other substances and food and whatever it may be start just completely taking over our nervous system, our chemistry, to the point where we can't feel the authenticity of what's going on inside. And start right now. Like, now is the time to start. Like, what are we waiting for? I've actually linked a meditation, which will probably show up on the screen here somewhere and also be in the description down below, of healing from trauma and shame. It's just a simple meditation to start tapping into some of those feelings. And I encourage you to check that out if you're looking to get into this more. So John Bradshaw gives us this quote: "Giving and receiving unconditional love is the most effective and powerful way to personal wholeness and happiness." At the end of the day, all of our neurotic problems, all of our uncomfortable feelings, everything inside of us comes down to the simple root question: are we worthy of love? And we have to constantly keep answering yes. And we have to fight for it. And it becomes a practice. And that's the whole element about this, is that it's a practice. We're practicing self-love. We're practicing compassion. And what we have for ourselves, we can then give to another. So if you are looking for help in any of this, you can schedule a free call down below, and we can start healing from trauma and shame today and work towards finding your authenticity. So that will be in the link in the description. If you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing, that would really help to get this video into YouTube's algorithm, help others to heal from trauma and shame, and it would really mean a lot to me. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.